Thanks for joining today. And yesterday we have gone through the Python history and we understood that Python 2 and 3 are actually completely different. And the versions of Python are like the 2.7.x, and that was last released in 2020 and discontinued. There is no further support. And Python 3 is not a copy-pasted version of Python 2, or it is not extending Python 2. Yep. When I'm talking about Python extending Python 2, it is not the successor version of Python 2.7. It is a completely different implementation itself, I can say. In Python 3, we do have the latest edition of Python 3 is actually 3.10, and it was actually last released in October 4th of October 2021. Then we have actually started with standard output and standard input operations. And the standard output operation, like in other programming language, to make your life easy and to understand it well, I'm just telling like in C, it is like printf. In C++, it is cout. In Java, it is system.out.println. Similarly, if you are familiar with Shell, it is just a echo statement. And most of the cells, it is echo statement by default. We can use print and printf too. Similarly, in Python, for the output operations, we are having printf. So we have gone through the example. I'm using PyCharm. This is the program which we have actually executed yesterday to understand how the Python printf statement is actually working. So if you look at here, I have actually used the first one. Let me maximize it. Just 1 minute. So if you want to actually maximize your screen settings, we can actually do it using the Control Alt and then the settings. Basically, we can actually do that. Appearance. I can go here and then it is Control Alt and S. If you press that, you can see the size and we can actually resize it. Some reason I'm not actually able to do that. I can do it using a 16, apply, and then OK. So it is like a little bit okay over here. So now here you can see this is how our printf statement looks like. The first printf statement, it is like hello world. The second one, we are actually using hello, then the separator is comma. Here it is not the part of the output. What it is going to do is it is actually going to separate two words. Okay, that is the default separator here. Now the third one, we are actually using three strings basically. The first one is hello, then the second one is how, and then the third one is actually are you. Then similarly the fourth one, here I'm just using separator. Separator is by default, guys, remember in print how the syntax is going to look like. Print, we have to specify the values. There are actually various type of print statement. The first one is actually print followed by value or values, okay, and it has to be quoted. If it is not variable, only values, it has to be quoted. Like say for example, the values is like could be anything, it should be quoted in double quotes or single quotes. Then second type of printf is like what we have actually used, like a print. Here I can specify value 1, then value 2. Let me copy paste it, done typing. So now this is value 2, and then I can specify value 3, right? And then here in print, we can actually use a separator. Okay, the separator, the default separator, if you're not specifying anything, think about a real-time scenario. Let's say I'm just giving like welcome to Python class. I'm using a separator here, right? What is the default separator? It is space. Similarly, in Python, if you're actually not using, let's say, value 1, value 2, and value 3, let's say I don't have a separator here, then what it is going to do? It is value 1 space value 2 space value 3. We can also change the separator using the SCP. SCP stands for separator. What is the separator between two strings? In this case, you can see this is my first value, this is my second value, this is the third value. I can say like no separator is something like plus. Can do that. Or you can say separator is double hyphen. We can also do that. You can say separator is slash n. We can also do it. Okay, like if I'm giving like no slash n, in this case, let us look at our second example over here. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm just specifying like no print Python print Python DevOps, then shell. I'm just giving like shell. Then I'm just giving here Java, and without separator. What it is going to do? It is going to print Python DevOps shell and Java in the single line, and the separator will be space. If I'm running this program, if you are using Python to run this current program, you can execute Control Shift and F10. Here you can see Python, DevOps, Shell, and Java. Now, if I want to actually specify some separator here, and the separator I have decided that I want to actually use a separator that is triple hyphen, I can either put it in single quotes or double quotes. It's going to work. Now triple hyphen. Now Control Shift F10. You can see it is actually Python, DevOps, Shell, and Java. If I want to separate all the strings over here, like I do have 4 strings or 4 words, that is Python, DevOps, Shell, and Java. In this case, if I want to use a separator as /n, that is also we can do it. Like it is going to print Python in line 1, DevOps in line 2, Shell in line 3, Java in line 4. If I'm executing this, you can see it here, the output. Like now, this is the output of the first print statement without separator. This is the second print statement with separator triple hyphen. Then the third print statement, I'm using /n. You can ask me, like, can I actually use multiple /n? The answer is yes, we can. Definitely, we can use like /n 3 times. That is also allowed. If I'm running this program, right, Control Shift F10, here you can see there are actually blank lines because /n is nothing but a new line. Did notice here, like /n is for new line. One moment, /n is for new line, and we do have /t for tab. So multiple spaces basically. Okay, tab space. We call it actually tab space. Tab space. Okay. Okay. While typing, you may see some like errors, like typo errors and all these things. So just ignore it. So now /t is for tab space. /n is for new line. This is how we can actually use separators. So now there is one more thing. By default, let's say in real time, I want to actually write line 1, then I'm just hitting enter, like line 2, then hitting enter, then line 3. So in the programming world, how do I specify that this is my enter key or a new line? I have to specify this is a /n here, this is a /n here, and this is /n here, right? I can specify this. So this is how we can specify. That is the region in Python printf statement. If I'm not specifying anything, let me write another program here. I'm just going to do here Python print or print example.py. Okay, so now in the print, I'm just giving like print hello, print world, print world. Now look at here. I've just given like print hello, print world. What it is going to do when I'm running the program, it is actually printing hello in line 1 and world in line 2, because the default end or end of line, the default end of line is new line, that is /n. /n is in new line. Now if I want to write some statements like this, like print Python, here I'm just specifying my default new line. I don't need this. Okay, what I want is I want a space or I want a comma. I can specify using end. Let's say I want a comma over here, I can do that. I want a space here, I can also do that, like end equal to space. I'm just giving like Python. Here I'm just giving DevOps. Then here I'm just giving, let's say, microservice. And no end. Now look at here the data, like Python, let's say DevOps, here I've just given end as in comma. Okay, and then here I did not give anything. Now if I'm running this program, Control Shift F10, in this case in Python, you can actually run the program hello world, because we have not specified any end, the default separator is /n. But the last three print statements, is Python, then followed by end is space. So that is the reason why you can see these are two lines. We have given two printf statements, but here the separator is actually space. Now, the separator between DevOps and microservices is actually comma. Here you can see the separator here between DevOps and microservices is comma, and then there is nothing because it is a new line. If you're not specifying anything, then separator here is actually end of line is actually end is new line. Here end is line separator is like comma. Here it is the line separator is space. It is space. Okay. So this is how you can actually deal with the end. So yesterday I have told you about SCP stands for separator, that is field separator, or you can say the separator between two strings or two values. End is to specify the separator between the lines. Okay, end is to specify that separator between the lines. Now, if your requirement is, guys, this is actually little bit tricky, and I will be covering this again during the file section. So for now, just remember it. Okay, print to a file, print to a file, print to file. I'm just giving print to file. Now, here print to file. I'm just going to copy paste everything. Okay, here because I don't actually write it again. Now I'm just given Python. Let's say Python is in one line. Then I'm just giving here DevOps. I'm just giving microservices, removing the comments over here. I'll just tell you a little different here. We are going to try. Now with open, I want to actually open any file for writing. I can do that with open. Let's say I'm just giving C:// all these things. I'm just going to cover it again. So don't worry about it. Okay, don't worry about it. We'll be covering again in our file management section txt, and I'm just going to do the write plus mode, and then this one here. What I'm going to do here is as file descriptor print, and I'm having print here, and I'm having print here. Here I can say there are actually many other ways to write to a file, but in print also we can actually write to a file. Here we can say file equals to fd. That's it. And the moment I'm just giving file equals to fd, then it is actually going to use the file descriptor, which is actually open, or the open file. Let's say with fd, this is the syntax to open any file. And in a quick understanding, I'm just giving here open can actually open any existing file or any new file. Then we are actually specifying the mode. I'm just giving if the file is there, overwrite it. If the file is not, I just create it. Okay, so now, and then as well as it can actually read and write, both the operations it can actually do. Now, if I'm running this program, like using Control Shift F10, here you can see there is no output. Let's say, for example, you want something here, print output in the console, and here I'm just giving print just to differentiate output in the file. Then I'm just giving the file equals to, there's a syntax, there is no shortcut, so you need to understand this. So now Control Shift F10, if I do Control Shift F10 here you can see output in the console. Now if I'm actually opening the file open, don't save. Okay, now I want to actually open it from my C drive, and then Python session, and here you can see demo.txt. You can see output in the file, Python, DevOps, and microservices. Okay, so now guys, there are three things. I have actually already told you three things. One is I have told you like the separator, I have told you end, then I have told you about file. So can anyone tell me quickly, like, what is the difference between these two? What is your understanding between these two? These three, sorry. What is separator? When to use separator? When to use end? And when to use file? Anyone wants to give it a try?
A separator will be used when we want to give some separator like between the two strings. End
Yes.
is the end of the line if you want to specify like how the line should end,
Mm-hmm.
and file is the default file if we need to do some read write operations.
Very nice. Very good. Actually, that is very quick. And then guys, remember, and budget Tanmay.
Yeah.
Okay. So separator is actually separate between words. End is like now this end is a separator. We can say end is a separator between lines, or we can say we can tell the program which character or which string we are actually using to end a line. File, which file you are actually going to write. Now the question will be, what is this? Again, like what is wait, what is open, and all these things, guys. In file management, I'm going to cover it again, so don't worry about it. So then, when we are actually doing the operations, the print operations, basically we are actually using a buffer. Okay. So the buffer, what it does is like whenever we are doing the standard output operation, chunk of characters chunk of characters at a time we are actually printing into the standard out or a file or anything. So there is another syntax known as plus. Okay, it is documented in the slide. We'll cover that mostly in the functions. There is one parameter what we can actually specify to the print a function is actually plus. By default, the plus is actually set to true. I believe it is actually set to true, but we can actually change it using the plus value. We can change it by default. The I operations are actually written in chunks, and in the Python printf statement, we can actually enable or disable it. Okay, so that is again a boolean value, and it is completely optional. If output needs to be flushed, then we can actually use true. Or if output like now once we actually buffer it, we can actually make it as false. How the syntax will look like? If you are actually asking me how the syntax will look like here I can actually see the plus equals to the default value is actually false, because we are actually not telling the system do the character by character operation, do it in chunks, which is faster. If there is a real requirement of like flushing it, buffering it, then what you can do is you can actually set it as actually true. So true and false are actually boolean values. So now we can actually define it as actually true. The default value, I think I told you by mistake the true, but by default that the value is actually false is actually false. Plus value is actually false. Okay, so this is what we can actually define. Let's say, for example, if I'm giving this to a user, let's say console1, and here I'm just giving like in a console2. Now, to the user, there will be like no difference. You can see all the output here. You can ask like, we are giving true, it is printing it here, giving false, it is printing it here. Then what is the use case? The use case is whenever you want to, let's say for example, bunch of characters you want to actually print, whether you want in chunks or you want character by character, this plus keyword is going to help you with that particular operation. So this is known as, in the functions, this is known as keyword arguments. Keyword arguments means, let's say for example, look at print statement. Okay, how the print statement looks like? We can specify the value here or values. Then here I can specify separator. What is my separator? I can specify the separator here, and separator could be anything. Then I can specify what is my end of line. I can specify something like this. Then I can specify, do I need to write it to a file? I can specify file followed by the file descriptor. Then do I need to use plus FLUSH plus? Then here you can say true or false. This is how the syntax of print is actually going to look like. This is how the syntax of print is going to look like. Values, separator, end, file, plus. Apart from this, we do not have anything else. So now you can actually ask me, what are these? Yesterday I've told you, print was a statement in Python 2, but in print in Python 3 is a function. These are nothing but known as keyword arguments. We are specifying what is my end, what is my separator, what is my file, whether the plus value is true or false, then this is the argument one. How many arguments you are actually passing to print? Print can take 5 arguments. The first argument is value, then the second argument is separator. Like now we can actually any order, because keyword arguments in functions I'm going to tell you, it could be in any order. Just remember, if you are modifying some existing program, it is mentioned like end followed by separator, separator followed by end, then file in the beginning. All these things you can actually change in any order. Okay, so that's how the print statement is actually going to work. Now, while printing it, you may come across with some special sequences, or your requirement is print something in multiple lines. Like print something in multiple lines. How do I do it? Let us write another program. Here to write another program in Python, right click on the project, new, then Python file. Now here I'm just giving like a print multi-lines. Okay. Now Python file. Now here I'm just giving print. I've just given here like multiple lines. I'm going to type like hello slash, let's say I'm just giving world. Okay, hello world. And then I'm just giving slash. Then here I'm just giving welcome to Python class. Okay, so now do it here. Now here see the output. Now Control Shift F10. If you do this, like here you can see hello world, then followed by welcome to Python class. You can ask me why there are actual multiple spaces. Guys, remember this is known as line continuation. If you're having something in multiple lines, you can actually continue. Let's say for example, you're having 5 lines, you can actually specify the backslash 4 times. This is line continuation. If you're actually familiar with Shell does support line continuation prompt as well. If your command or one liner is actually more than one line, basically we call it as actually one liner in Shell, but it will look like 5 lines or 10 lines. Or you want to better readability, you want to actually put it on the second line, then what you can do is you can tell the system, hey, my statement has not ended here, I'm still continuing. This is the line continuation. Okay, backslash you can actually specify n number of times, you can actually specify. Then you can actually ask me, if I'm not specifying this, I'm just specifying no specifying here, then what is going to happen? Guys, as I am using PyCharm here, it is actually smart enough to detect the errors. It is actually detecting the errors are actually there. It is like missing closing quote. Now, if I go here, it is saying identifier is actually expected and colon is missing, and all these things are actually coming across, because without continuation, we cannot actually do that. Let's say, for example, if I'm running this Control Shift F10, here you can see the error message. What the error message is actually saying, yesterday I've actually explained how to interpret the basic error message. Let us try it again. It is saying the program name is actually multilines.py, and this is the file path. This is the complete path of the program. Then line number 5, print hello, syntax error, unterminated string. Unterminated string means it is saying the quoting or it is not properly closed, or double quotes is missing, because system is unable to detect, okay, the second line is continuation. So without backslash, we cannot actually deal with it. Then the second thing is, okay, is it going to work if I'm specifying single quotes? The answer is no, it is not going to work. Even if you are actually giving single quote, it is not going to work. Run the program again, you can see the error message, the same error message. We do have a solution, but ideally we use it for documentation. When I'm talking about the documentation, we can actually, let's say for example, I'm writing a function or writing a package. I want to actually have some documentation. Let's say my package is actually demo. What demo is actually going to do? For that, we need to actually use documentation comment. Okay, documentation comment. For documentation comment, you can use either double quotes 3 times or single quote 3 times. Now look at here, print, here I'm actually having like single quotes 3 times. Here I can specify the single quotes 3 times. It is actually going to work. Okay. Now if I'm running this program, Control Shift F10, here you can see hello world, welcome to the Python class. The difference between the first program and the difference between the first statement and the second statement is here it is a continuation, it is not specifying any new line. In this case there will be like in this statement new line will not be. Okay, I can say in this statement it's just one line. Just one line, okay? But in the next statement here, it is 3 lines. How do I differentiate it? From the output itself, we can actually differentiate. Hello world, then welcome to the Python class. This is actually in the 3 lines. Okay, now, can I actually use double quotes? That is my next thing. Okay, yes, you can definitely use double quotes. Okay, we can also use double quotes. In Shell, we call it as a partial quoting, double quotes. Here we call it as double quotes, that's it. So double quotes 3 times. Okay, use 3 double quotes. This double quotes, double quotes, double quotes, okay? And let's say, here I'm just giving line 1, line 2, then I'm just giving line 3. Line 3. Okay, now look at here, Control Shift F10 if I do, here it is giving line 1, line 2 and line 3. Now, if I'm executing with the end, I'm just giving here like end is, I'm just specifying here, my end is hyphen, hyphen, hyphen. Now run the program again, Control Shift F10. Here you can see like line 1, line 2 and line 3, because whenever you're actually using documentation comment, it is actually taking /n as a character, it is completely one string. So in this case, what is happening, it is actually, because print statement, what is my end? So this entire print is actually one statement. So guys, you need to understand, it is not going to print line 1, it is not going to print, it's not going to print line 1, hyphen, 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 then line 2, and so on. Okay, so it's not going to print like this. It is going to, the hyphen will be printed only once at the end. The triple hyphen will be printed only once at the end. Okay, so this is like various kind of print operations. So far what you can actually do yesterday and today, at least any Python program, any complex Python program you open, you can interpret the print statements. Okay, the print statements can have a single line, can have multiple lines, say within single quotes, within double quotes, and all these things are actually possible. So this is the use cases of print for print so far. So here we are done with like the output operation, standard output operation. Now I'm just going to start a new topic that is known as standard in operation. That is input operation or standard in operation. Input operation. Fine then, yeah. So input operation. So in the input operation, let me correlate with other programming. Let us like cell programming. Most of us are actually familiar. Like read is like input operation. In C it is like scanner. In C++ it is actually cin. In Java it is like little lengthy actually. Okay. So similarly in Python we do have two type of functions. In Python 2 it was raw underscore input. This is actually Python 2 to take the input from the user, and then we are also having like the input function, but here I'm just using like an input as a function. What is the use case of input?
Yes, sorry, sir. Sorry to disturb you. Some network issue. Sir, I have one that question, right? So we have every time we have to give the three time we have to give double quotation for that program.
3-time double quotation you can actually use only when your data is actually in the multiple lines. Let's say, for example, here you have a print statement, you are dealing with some content. Okay.
Okay. Okay,
Now
sir.
this is a print statement you are having, like, now let's say some example, like for example, you want to actually separate it, like, using multiple lines, like line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, line 5 and all. So you have two options. You put like line 1, line 2, line 3. Let's, for example, you do want to actually give a space, you can feel free to use this. Okay, line 2, line 3, something like this, line 3. Then I can actually use line 4. I can use line 5. Okay, and then I can use line 6. So this is how I can actually specify. One way I can actually execute this. If I take out this one, let me go to session. I think I have a dummy file here, session. Okay, and now in the session, if I do this, if I'm running this program, right? So here you can see the what is line 1 to line 6. So in the multiple lines, either you do this way, or else what you need to do is you can actually execute multiple. Like if I want to actually do like a line in 6 lines, what I can actually do here, the same piece of code. Let's say you are not familiar with this one. What you can do is you can specify line 1 like this, then followed by, you can actually copy paste, and then up to line 6 you can actually give. It does the same thing. Line 1, then followed by line 2, then followed by line 3, and I can specify line 3. I can specify line 4 here. Okay, and then line 5 and line 6, print line 6. It's just the same like what we have done using the other way. Like, we have actually used 3 times double quotes or 3 times triple quote. Either you do that with a single print statement, or use like 6 print statement. Choice is up to you. Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
we can
Thank
use this and run the program, and we can do this way. Or else there is a better way of doing it. Okay, and ideally what we can actually do is we can specify line 1 slash line 2 slash line slash and line 3 slash and line 4, then slash and line 5, then slash and line 6. This is something also we can actually do. So this is like how you can actually print multiple lines, the first one, the second one, and the third one. Okay, so if I copy paste this line over here, right? So now here we go. It does the same thing. Control Shift F10. If I do, it is actually printing the line 1. Okay, the slash n I need to specify slash n line 2, then here I can say like line 3 slash n. Just for better readability, I'm just giving a space because slash n is actually missing here, so that's the reason it is printing slash over there.
Yes.
Otherwise, in Python 2, wherever you see you're maintaining a code and you see raw input blindly, you can say this is Python 2, because Python 3 we do not have a concept of raw input. Okay, if we do not have a concept of raw input, and what we have in Python 3 is it is input. And what is the input syntax? I'm just going to tell you in some time. What we are going to do with input is we can actually take the input from the user. Yesterday's example, like I was actually telling you are in an ATM, punching your card, entering your PIN, right? Similarly, let us do that programmatically here. Like, welcome to SBI, I'm just writing it here. Let me write it here. Like the print statement, you are actually familiar. Now let me write it here. Like the print, welcome to SBI ATM, SBI ATM. Okay. Now I'm just going to print. It is actually asking PIN. I'm just telling like enter your name. Enter your name. I'm doing a registration for account, so it is actually asking enter your name. I'm just giving here like input. Okay, just like this. Enter your name, then input. Then when we are actually using input, guys, there are actually two things. If I'm giving like input, I should definitely store the input like any variable, like real time. If you're dealing with any content, dealing with any item, you are actually storing it. Let's say, doesn't matter whether it is your grocery, whether it's a book, whether it's your laptop, whether it is any object, you need a space to store. or whether you are actually driving a car, you need a parking place to park it. Similarly, whenever you're actually dealing with the input, you need a place or you need some identifier to store it. Why identifier? Just look at the vehicles, any vehicle like two-wheelers, four-wheelers, unique numbers are actually given just to identify who is the owner of it, right? What is the scope of this? Similarly, if you are owning a flat, you are having a flat number. Similarly, in Python, if you are actually dealing with identifier, you have to do the naming. Like in real world, we are having naming ceremonies for the babies, including all of us. We had like naming ceremonies, right? So now here in Python also we do have like naming ceremonies. I call it as actual naming ceremonies because you can actually correlate and understand it. Okay, so don't tell to anyone that this is naming ceremony. Identifier is actual part of a naming ceremony. In your interview, then it's a straight no, and like you should actually tell it as identifiers. So in Python, what we call it as? Call it as identifiers. What is the objective of using identifier? To identify at a later point of time, or you can refer to that particular identifier at a later point of time. So how do we deal with it? The syntax is when you are actually dealing with input, the syntax is you should have an identifier or a variable. I can say variable, then equals to, then value. Okay. Now the question is, should I give a space here? Should I give a space here? Is it part of the syntax? The answer is straight no. But we should actually, as a better programmers, we should actually specify space. Then you can say like, if I do not give space, I'm not a better programmer. It's not like that. There are actually some coding standards. I can write entire thing, let's say for example, shell scripting in one line. But if it is like, is it readable? Just ask a question. If I'm writing everything in one line, is it readable? No. Just think about reading a book. Are they writing everything in one line? No. In any book, we are having separate lines, paragraphs, pages, and all these things, right? Chapters to differentiate. And then we do have index to refer it at a later point of time. Similarly, here, whenever we are actually doing a variable assignment, we should actually give a space before and after equal to symbol. In shell, if you do this, you are going to get error. But in C programming, C++, Java, any other programming, giving space before and after equal to symbol, it's going to work as expected. Okay, so now this variable equals to value. Now, this value can be a value or can be a function. In the function, it should actually return, right? In the function, I'm going to cover in details in the function section, maybe after 20 days, 15-20 days, we can actually touch like functions. Then you can actually understand like how you can actually assign the function output to a variable. Okay, so function should return something. Here the input, it returns a string. I'll just tell you, input returns a string. Here I'm just giving like name equals to input. Enter your name equals to input. Now how do I print this name? How do I print this name? I can specify here print. Here I can specify hey, then name. Hey, then name. Look at here. This is a very simple program, standard input operation, and very simple program. And you should actually understand like what it is going to do. Like read example. I'm just giving read example and Python file here. Okay. Now this is my read example. Now, if I'm running this program, Control Shift F10, look at here. It is saying like welcome to SBI ATM. This is a print statement. The second print statement is actually enter your name. Then we do have a variable. Guys, don't worry. We'll again cover variable section. I'll just let you know the data types. Then we'll be dealing with multiple variables. There are actually 5 or 6 different types of variables or data types are actually available, and each data type we can actually run through the example to understand how to read it from the input, standard input, how to store it to a variable, how to evaluate it, and all these things we'll cover in detail. So now here name equals to input is a function, and here it is actually waiting for the input, like enter your name. I'm just giving Subbu, Now here it is saying, hey Subbu, it is actually printing, hey Subbu over here, okay? So now the question is, I have used like input here and again a print statement here, again another print statement like integer name here. Now the question is, I don't want to actually give a separator here. I can actually specify I want like end should be nothing. End should be nothing. End is nothing here. End is nothing means there is no new line. If I run the same program again here you can see it is saying like enter your name. It is actually waiting here like Subhasis. I'm just giving like Subhasis here. It is saying hey Subhasis. Now the technical takeaways from this program is the first one is actually the printf statement. The second one here we are actually using end equals to null whenever you look like I do want a new line over here because I want to actually pass the input right just right after the printf statement. Then you can actually do this end equals to null and end equals to nothing. It could be like two single quotes or two double quotes. That name I'm just storing it in input. I'm just getting it and then storing it in variable name. Then print hey name. Here you can see like it is actually going to print hey followed by the variable. The variable name is actually name. Guys, remember when you are actually dealing with variables, let me go to the notepad to explain it better. Like whenever, let me take a snipping tool. Okay, now look at here. So whenever you are actually dealing with the variables, look at here. This is my variable name, right? So here the variable name, when I'm referring the variable name here, there is no quotes. There is no quotes, but hey is actually quoted because hey is a string. Okay, but name is a variable. So we are referring to the variable. Guys, remember when you're dealing with the variables, when you're dealing with the variables in the printf statement, do not quote it. Do not quote it. Let's say, for example, another example I'm just going to give you. Let's say num1, I'm just giving like num1 equals to 10, num2 equals to 20, then num3 equals to 30. Okay, here I can say like print, I can specify num1, num2, then num3. Okay, num3. If I do like this, num1, comma num2, num2, and then comma num3 in quotes, what is going to happen? We'll cover it and then see. Sorry, we'll run it and see. Let's say I want num1, num2, and num3 without spaces. Let us see like what is going to happen. Like num1, num2, num3. Here, definite error. Here, it will be like giving the output as num1, num2, num3, and then here the output will be 10, 20. It's not comma actually 10, 20, and 30. Okay, but if I'm giving like num1, num2, num3, here I'm just saying like my separator, the value separator is comma here. The output here will be 10, comma 20, comma 30. 10, then comma 20, then comma 30. Okay, now let us run the program. This is like dealing with input operations. Okay, one moment, Python new file, and here I'm just giving like input. This is not input actually, variable example. Okay, so this is my program. If I'm running this program, Control Shift F10, here you can see as I told, here you can see num1, num2, num3. What it is saying? It is saying like in this file, line number 7, print num1, num2, num3 error. Num1, num2, num3 is not defined. Num1, num2, num3 is not defined. So this is actually like giving us error. So to correct it, either you can actually correct it or else I'm just putting it actually comment. You can uncomment and I'll just tell you like what is comment and also don't worry about it. So for the time being, I'm just commenting it using like maybe a single like pound sign or hash mark, or you can have like for 10 pounds or 2 pounds or 3 pounds. doesn't matter like how many pounds, it is like cell, so the comment remains same. So now 10 20 30, then 10 20 30, then the next one will be like num1 num2 num3. Just run the program. Here you can see num1 num2 num3. So you should not quote the variables if your requirement is actually to refer the value of these variables. If you're referencing the value of the variables, do not quote it. Then the question is, if I'm not giving any space, what is going to happen? Nothing going to happen. I can actually run it, Control Shift F10. Here you can see there is nothing, no errors, nothing is there. Okay, but ideally you can actually specify. This is actually the best practice. You should actually specify a space before and after equals to. Even if you are not specifying, it's not going to throw any error. Let's say if you are telling, I'm just having like 10 spaces, what is going to happen here? Okay, so now Control Shift F10, it is also going to work 10, 20, 30. But do you think this is actually right? No. Syntax wise, there is nothing wrong. But we should not actually give the value like this. Is it actually going to help us to read what is my num2, num3? Look at left, look at the extreme right, you can actually see the value. Don't do that. Don't do that, okay? And you should actually use meaningful separators here, like one space is actually more than enough. If you are like kind of lazy and don't actually follow the standard, don't give any space. But my recommendation will be like give specify before and after equal to symbol, okay? For better code readability and to like adhere to the best practices. Okay, so that's all about like how we can actually refer the values. So this is all about like the input operation. I'm just going to tell you another example. Let us go back here. This is my read example, right? This is my read example. I'm just going to fine tune this program, and I'm just going to tell you one more way of like taking the input from the user, like Python file. Let's say here I'm just giving like input example2 .python file here. Now run this program. We really don't need a print statement. We really don't need a print statement. What we need here is we can directly give enter your name in the input itself. Input supports prompt. Like if you are familiar with Bash, there is a keyword like known as read hyphen p for prompt. Okay, so now here in Python it is input followed by prompt. The syntax of input is you can directly use input like this without prompt, or you can actually use input then followed by here you can say prompt. So avoid using print statement to prompt something. Okay. So now here I can specify enter your name. It is actually going to print like hey Subbu. Let me look at here. Control Shift F10. Here is a welcome SBI ATM. This enter your name is actually coming from the input statement. This enter your name is actually coming from input statement. Then we are actually printing like hey name. I'm just giving here, let's say Anil. Now here you can see hey Anil. Okay, it is going to print hey Anil. So this is how you can actually deal with the input. Now, one thing I'm just going to tell you that is actually quite interesting. There is a function known as type. There is a function known as type. Let's say type function. What it is going to do, it is going to return the type of the specific value. Type of a specific value or a variable we can actually say. How do I deal with type? Let's say I'm having like num equals to num1 equals to 10. Now print, I'm just saying like I'm just giving type of 10. This is like let's say type of 20, not to like confuse you here. I'm just giving like print what is the type of 20. Now print, I'm just giving type of num1. What is the type of num1? Let's say I'm having a variable that is like name equals to Shubhu. String has to be quoted in single quotes or double quotes. Now print, if I'm specifying like what is the type of name, what is the type of name, we'll see like what is the type of name. The interesting fact is if you are giving print type of, let's say for example 100 here, it is going to give number, but if you give print type of 100 in quotes, 100 in quotes, it is actually going to return string. It is going to return string. Let us look at here. This is a small example to understand the type of the variable. Let's say here we go, Python file. Here I'm just giving like type example, Python file here, and done. Okay. If I'm running this program, Control Shift F10, here you can see the first one is actually name is actually 10, and then name equals to num equals to 10, name equals to Subbu. Then type of 20, this is nothing but int type. Okay, this is integer type. Then second one is also int type. Then third one is also name, but is actually string type, str type. The fourth one it is int type. Then the fifth one it should be string type. Okay, when you are actually using type, it is actually returning class. Because this class, if you're actually familiar with any object-oriented programming languages like C++, Java, C Sharp, anything, and if you're little familiar with object-oriented programming also, you must have actually heard about like now a keyword known as class. So here in Python, we call it as actually integer class, string class, list class. Then we do have like many others like tuple is there, dictionary is there, set is there. There is like many others are actually there. Okay, so now here the types are actually giving like integer. Whenever it is not quoted, let's say for example 20 or 100 and 100, the last two, you can look at here. The output is actually int and str. Remember, if your input is actually number or floating point, let's say for example, I want to actually floating point, I can specify type of print type of, I can specify here, let's say 27.9. 27.9 is a float. Now let us say Control Shift F10. Here you can see it is actually float. And similarly, we do have like Boolean type. This is float. Float is a data type. Now similarly, we do have like Boolean, like type of, I'm just giving like type of true, TRUE. And remember, the true is actually capital T, and it should not be quoted. Okay, Control Shift F10. If I do this, here you can see it is actually Boolean. But if you are giving true in small case, Python is actually case sensitive for Booleans actually. If you are giving true, in this case, let us say like on a Control Shift F10, if you are doing, it is actually going to throw error because it's true is not defined. Did you mean true? This is artificial intelligence saying like it is print in this print statement. It's saying like not true is a name error because true is not present. Is it a variable? It is stating like you can see it here. In the Python, you can easily identify how to refer the string, how to refer the variables. You can see like the strings are actually in this color. Boolean is actually in in a different color. Then the variables are in white in color, right? And the floating point you can, or the numbers basically, it is in a different color. Put the color coding, if you're actually familiar, by looking at the color coding itself, you can actually able to identify that's the reason why we are actually using IDs. Now, also like some of the IDs, it does allow us to like customize the color coding, but I've never actually done any customization in the color coding part because I prefer to work with the defaults. Okay, so now because it is easy to manage the things than customizing like int for orange in color, and then at later point of time I forgot, okay, what is the color for int? It was orange. Where did I set it up? Don't do that actually. Okay, I don't know like whether it is supported in Python, but it is doable in some of the editors. So now here you can see it says like this is actually wrong. Don't try this. Okay, true is here. I'm just specifying true, false, are booleans. Okay, are bulls. Okay, and it is case sensitive. Case sensitive. Okay, so these are the types. Now here these are the types what we are actually going to deal with, and there are many other types. So at this moment let us actually conclude it here. Like now these are the basic types. Okay, now
Hi,
I'm just
Suraj.
going. Yes.
Yeah, one doubt I am having. Can you go to the editor, PyCharm editor?
Yes.
So if you will mention, like if you will write like print type f and the boolean what you have put in caps T and RU in small, if you will enclose that within double quote, so what will the output then?
It will be string. Very nice question. So if the question, if I understood it correctly, if the let's say true, it is in double quotes like this, right? This is your question, if I understood it. So it is actually going
Yeah.
to give string because it is not going to detect as boolean. If it is boolean, do not quote it. Okay. In this case, it is quoted. You are telling the system that this is quoted, it is string. It is quoted, so it is string. A very nice question.
Thank you.
Like look at here. Okay, this is string, this is boolean. Doubt is clear?
Yeah, pretty clear.
Is your doubt clear or you have anything?
No, clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for asking, guys. This is an interesting one. Okay, do not quote it. It is case sensitive. It is T in capital case. And okay, as we are actually covering it, you can actually specify here also false. So false, you can actually specify false. False should not be quoted. Okay, now control shift F10. This is also going to return like boolean, boolean, and then string. Okay, and do not quote it. Okay, false also do not quote it. This is boolean, and this is boolean. If you are quoting, it's quoted, it's a string. Okay, similarly, false is quoted, false will be string. So that's all about that's all about the boolean types here. In some of the programs, programming languages and scripting languages, we do have 0 and 1 for true and false. But here it is true and false we are actually using. In general, we should actually use always true and false. I'll just let you know like where exactly we are actually going to get the boolean values. Let's say for example, I'm comparing two numbers. If num1 equals to num2, it is going to return true or false. Let's say I'm comparing two lists, I'm comparing two values, any type of values. In that case, it does return a boolean, like now either it will be a true one or it will be a false one. Okay, so now let me tell you one more thing. Okay, let us go in depth of input. I told you this to give you the second example here on, say, I think this is third example, example 3, example 3. Okay, now Python file. Now here I'm just giving, let's say I'm just reading num1 equals to input of enter a number, enter a number. Now here I'm just giving name equals to input of enter your name, enter your name. Okay, now I'm just giving now print num1 comma name. Okay, so if you are actually not giving a space here, like see here, okay, it is also going to work. But ideally, whenever you're actually dealing with separated values, this is better to give a space. Or if you are actually using a function call, no need to give space, that is also going to work. Now if I'm giving print type of num1 and then type of num2, it's not num2, it's name, actual type of name. Now guys, remember, it's all string. It's all string. Then you can actually ask me why it is all string. I've given a number and we have gone to the program and 10 is a number, but it is actually saying 10 is a string. It is saying 10 Subbu, it is string and string, because by default input is actually going to return a string type. Input always returns a string type value, like input, the return type of input is always a string, always a string. Now the question is, if it is always a string, let us have another example, to do some arithmetic operation, like adding two numbers. Basically, I'm just going to tell you here. Let's say input example 4, for example. Okay, now here we go. I have a num1. I'm just giving like input another number, input another number here, num2, num2. And as we have gone through the first program and understood that both the types are actually string, if I'm giving like num1 plus num2, what is going to happen? Let us look at here, like control shift F10. Here it is giving like enter a number, I'm just giving 10, enter another number 10, 20, it is saying 10, 20. It is saying the output is not 30, it's not 30, it's concatenation. Okay, it's concatenation and the result will be like 10, 20. It's not 30. If input is 10 and 20, then the output is not 30. Then the output is not 30. It is 10, 20. Now the question is, if it is a string, let's say for example control shift F10, and then I'm just giving like here I'm just giving like Subbu, here I'm just giving Tanmay, and then here you can say Subbu Tanmay. Like if I'm giving like control shift F10, and here I'm just giving like here I'm just giving Subbu and nothing, it is saying like only Subbu. Now guys, remember, this is known as concatenation. By default, the plus is actually used for concatenation of two strings. Okay, so now if I'm actually giving, if I'm giving like two numbers, my requirement is like print the sum of two numbers, Now let us see what is going to happen here. There is something known as casting, typecasting. Okay, the typecast, how do I do it? I can specify here integer of num1, int of num1 with int value of num2, give me the result. In this case, it is actually going to return 30. Let's say control shift F10. If I'm running this program, it is like 10 here, 20 here, and then first one is 10, 20, then second one is 30. But if you are actually giving, if you are giving the output, let's say sorry, input as like Subbu and then Tanmay, and then here you can see casting error. int, we are actually casting the value. We are changing the type to int. Whatever we are actually entering, we are actually we are actually changing the type to int and then doing the arithmetic operation plus over here, addition over here. But Subbu, Python cannot actually convert it. Now, how do I do it? Like guys, remember, so far you are actually familiar with syntax error. Now, this is a new type of error. Wherever you can see value error, then there is some problem with your value. It could be like integer value expected. You are actually specifying a specifying a string value or a null, or string value is actually required. You are actually passing like 10, 20, 30, something like that numbers or floating point numbers. Then you can see value error. Value error means whenever you see like value error, you can definitely say invalid literal for int, because literal for int means, let's say for example, I do have a variable 1 equals to 100. 100 is nothing but a literal. Let's say name equal to Subhasis. Subhasis is nothing but a literal. Let's say salary equals to 100.25. 100.25 is nothing but a literal. All the literals are having types. Let's say for example, in this case, think about like this program, we are having 10 here and Subbu here. 10 is a literal, Subbu is a literal. What is the type of this literal? It is int. We are thinking, okay, whenever we are actually taking the input using input function, this 10, if I'm passing that is a string. But if I'm actually specifying variable equals to hard-coded value without any quotes, this is actually nothing but a number. So now, guys, remember, if you're familiar with any other programming language, let's say for example C, we must have actually gone through the C course actually during our college days. In C, C++, Java and all, you can see explicitly if you want to actually define a variable like int variable 1 equals to 10, or you can give a space, that is also fine. We are explicitly specifying int type. Similarly, if I want like float, I can actually, instead of int, I'll be just using float. I want a large float number, I can actually use double. Let's say I want anything like a boolean, I can definitely define a boolean value. I want a string, I can definitely define a string type, array type, and all these things. Many things we can actually do. But in Python, we do not explicitly specify the type of the variable. It is type, there is no type, it is variable equals to value. Based on whatever you are actually storing, the programming, Python programming is actually smart enough to identify what is the type of that particular data. So now, in this case, the type is actually string. We are explicitly casting it to int type and then doing the sum. Okay, so this is all about the operation, like how do you deal with the operation. Let's say, for example, the same program, what I'm going to do is like I'm just going to fine tune it. Okay, now the Python file, now input cast, input typecasting, Python file, the same program. Instead of actually casting it here, what I can do here is I can directly type like int of input of a number. Here also I can specify int of input of a number. Okay, enter another number. I can say another number, and here num1 plus num2 is going to work as expected. Okay, so now Control Shift F10. If I'm going to do Control Shift F10 here and passing like 10 and the value, what happened here? I think the previous program was running earlier. Now Control Shift F10.
Line number 3, we have not mentioned like input.
Yeah. Yes, I just missed that. There's active copy paste. Control Shift F10, stop and rerun. Here I'm just giving like 10, then 20 here. It is actually giving 30. Okay, so this is how it is actually going to work. But if you are actually giving Control Shift F10 and no input, it is actually going to say like value error. Now the question will be like from you, how do we control it? Don't worry, have patience. We have many other ways to handle this. So as soon as we are actually familiar with like string functions, and then subsequent sessions by maybe by end of next week, you'll be familiar and you can actually deal with all the inputs. Okay, for now, like just do a positive testing, don't do a negative testing. One quick thing I used to tell in my training sessions, developers are actually always positive. Adding two numbers, developers will tell like test it with numbers only. They are not going to test with A and B. What is the result? They are not going to do that. But testers, these testers are actually, like any testers in this group, don't feel bad. Testers are actually, what they will do, they are very much confident, okay, this guy has actually spent good amount of time developing this one. Definitely it is going to work if I'm giving two numbers. Testers will actually pass nothing first. Okay, then they will actually document test case 1 failed, value null. It is actually throwing value error. Test case 2, pass A and B, it is also not working. Test case 3, first value is integer, then the second value nothing, it is also failing. Test case 4, first value is actually null, then the second value is number, it is also not working. Then they will come up with like, hey, you are actually adding two numbers. These are the 4 test cases which is not working. Now you are actually done. You have handled everything. Then the program went for testing. Now this time what they will do, they will actually do a load testing. It is able to handle like addition of 1 million numbers, but when the number is very big, like the number is very big in the sense, let's say Control Shift F10, this is a number I'm just going to give, let's say 1 followed by 1 multiple times. This is actually a number, right? And then even I don't know like what it is going to return. So this is what I'm just going to do. Okay, I'm like I wish this could be my salary actually someday. Okay, so now here you can see this is a large number. So there will be like various type of testing they can actually do and come up with like what is supported, what is not supported, and all these things. We do have like range of all the data types. So while covering the range, data types, I'm just going to tell you the ranges. Maybe for academics, it is definitely a mandatory thing to remember, like, what is the int range, what is the float range, right? Many other things basically. But here we are not going to learn that, but I'll just give you a slide with all the references of ranges and all, so you can actually have a look at it. Okay, so this is all about like how do you deal with the various type of inputs. Now the last program for today, I'm just going to tell you that is actually an interesting program. There are two things which you should know. Now look at here. Now Control Shift F10. One moment. New Python file. I'm just giving a print. This is the last example for today. Print example. Let's say one Python file. Here I'm just writing like print. My requirement is actually printing asterisk 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It is done. Now, if my requirement is actually print asterisk 10 times, I can actually specify 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If my requirement is actually asterisk 1000 times, then how many times I can actually count? I don't have actually time to do that. So now what you can actually do, let's say print any character, it's not asterisk, any character. Let's say you want A to be printed 3 times. Just give A3. Now Control Shift F10, it is actually going to give like 3 times A. If your requirement is like printing A 3 times followed by B 10 times, B should be actually quoted in single quotes or double quotes, and then you can do, let's say for example x followed by 5 times. Here you can see the result like Control Shift F10. So this is like A followed 3 times, then a space, then B followed by 3 times, and all these things you can actually specify. If you want like, okay, I don't actually all these spaces, this spaces is actually not as part of my requirement, then I can actually tell, do one thing, give a separator as null, like I told you as like end as null. Here I'm just giving like separator as null. Here you can see the output is like this: A followed by 3 times, B followed by this, and all these things. Let's say for example you are actually generating a real-time example. You are generating a dynamic password, okay, or a passphrase, and it should be like the first character should be like alphabet, any alphabet in small case. Second character should be any alphabet in capital case, then followed by any number like 15 times. So if you want to do that, then guys remember this asterisk mark is known as multiplication operator. When you are actually doing arithmetic expressions, you are having arithmetic operations, it is known as multiplication operator. If you are dealing with like string type of expression, so this is string type expression, and in this case it is known as repetition operator. Repetition or replication operator. Replication means many times in real life you are actually asking, let's say for example something is not working in a production environment, you are getting an email, the next step to the customer, next step to the user is, could you please let me know the replication steps, like how do I replicate it? So now in this case the replication operator is nothing but a asterisk mark. Now the question is it only for alphabet? The answer is no. If can I actually repeat asterisk mark, let's say asterisk mark 10 times? You can definitely do the asterisk mark 10 times. Okay, now here you can see Control Shift F10. Here you can see. Okay, this is how you can actually specify asterisk mark 10 times. Instead of you specify 10 times asterisk mark here, or you specify asterisk mark 10 times like this, it is just the same. Okay, so now in Shell, whenever we decorate something like hyphens in the beginning, or we are actually writing a menu-driven program, we end up writing like hyphen a number of times, asterisk a number of times. Don't do that. Use like smart techniques like repetition or replication operator. So that's all about input and output operations so far. And what are the topics we have covered so far? I'm just going to tell you. Okay, today at least we deal with like print, various type of print. We are actually here input and output operations. Then I'm just going to tell you about fundamentals, Python character sets, delimiters, identifiers, keywords, literals. Then what kind of operators we are having, right? And then we are comments. Anyway, I've started using it, but I'll just formally, I'm just going to tell you that. Then variables and data types. So Chandu, here we are going to cover the data types. I have questions till then. And we are actually, once we are done with the data types, we'll be going for typecasting, various of typecastings we can do. So far, I have just given you an example of like, how do we convert the input type using the int function basically, right? And then program execution flow, I'm just going to tell you that. Then different types of errors. Then we'll be actually going for the control flow, and we'll be learning like control statements. And that is one is actually conditional statements, then transport statements, where we are going to learn like continue and pass. Then we'll actually jump into the loopings, that is for and then while. Interesting fact here is like so far you must be actually familiar with if else, if else and all, right? But here in iterative statements, we do have for else, for supports else, while also supports else, and we'll go through it. Then we'll go through like string data type, and we do have various functions. And the more functions you know, the less number of code you are actually going to write. In my shell programming session, Linux programming session, I used to actually tell this sentence: the more commands you know, the less number of code you are actually going to write. Here I'm just telling, like repeating it again, right? The more functions, the more methods, more packages, more modules you know, the less number of code you are actually going to write. So because we are actually learning for the very first time here right now, manual and dictionary, then I'm just going to tell you about like the set operations. Then we're going to use like functions. And function, there are actually few advanced concepts, and those advanced concepts I'll just see while covering the function. If you guys can actually understand it well, then I'll actually cover the advanced concepts. Otherwise, maybe once you're actually familiar, we can actually take a break of one month or 2 months. When I'm talking about like a break, that is the break for the session. Okay, not break for you, and you should not actually give up Python. You should actually practice it for 1 and 2 months in Python, then come prepared with questions, and then ask me like what is next, when we are going to like learn the advanced topics and all. We can probably, if all are okay and all are actually up to by December, maybe sometime in January, February time frame, we can actually learn advanced concepts with object-oriented features and everything. Because I don't actually overload everything right now to you guys. I know it will be very, very difficult for you to understand, memorize, and by heart everything right now within a short time of a month or 2 months. Then once functions are done, we can actually go to file handling. File handling, ideally, we do deal with like text files, binary files and all. But in the group, I have already mentioned like how to deal with JSON files sometimes, JQ and all. There are questions, right? So how do we deal with like Python files? And I'm just going to tell you that like YAML, Python, XML, and then Excel files, CSV files, and all these things. Okay. Then database operations, models packages, then regular expressions, exception handling, and real-time implementations. In real-time implementation, we'll be actually dealing with file handling, API calls. I may actually use like the free APIs like Yahoo Finance, or like I can actually spin up some infra using like Boto3, that is the AWS like APIs. I'm familiar with that, so we can actually explore something over there, right? And then when talking about like database operations, I'll show you like how to do the database operations in MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, MongoDB. I can actually give an example. To be very honest, I do not have actually any expertise in MongoDB, but we can actually do some sample operations in MongoDB too, if time permits, and if you guys are actually okay and then want to explore, then we can actually definitely go through it. And that's all about the content for today, and we'll just go in details in a later point of time.